Hello, this is Mr. George, and this is Web Lecture 6.2. Now, we've been talking about where our laws come from prior to this, and we discussed the differences between moral and legal code and how those have led to the types of laws that we have in the United States. Now, we can't talk about laws without talking about how laws are enforced, and so today we're going to be talking about the enforcement of laws. So, when we talk about enforcement of laws, most of us probably come to the first assumption that we're talking about, and that is like police forces. So, certainly we are going to talk about that, but there are other agencies of particularly the federal government that enforce laws as well. So, we'll first discuss federal protection agencies, agencies like the FDA, and then we'll talk about law enforcement agencies. We will talk about both these, and then we will be finished. So, let's start off with the federal protection agencies first. Now, there are three types of federal protection agencies. The first type is consumer protection. This is probably the most prevalent type of federal protection agency and probably the one that you are most aware of. These are government regulation agencies that are there to basically protect consumers. They might require businesses to give certain information. They may do inspections. They are there basically to make sure that public safety and health is maintained at all times. Because prior to agencies like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, there was really no consumer protection, and factories were filthy, the workers were treated terribly, the product that was being sent out to the public was not at all good for public consumption. And so this really cuts down on the issues as far as consumer issues go. And so really what we're looking for here is an agency that protects the consumer, and usually there are specific regulations that they put into place. As I said, the Food and Drug Administration is one of those examples of a consumer protection agency. Now, the next type of federal protection agency is an independent agency. Now, independent agencies are a little bit different because they may not necessarily enforce any kind of rules, but they really kind of vary widely because some of them do. There are some that are regulatory groups, and they oversee certain parts of the economy. Others are just groups that provide specific services. So I have an example of each one of those. The EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, that's one of those regulatory groups. So they protect the environment and create regulations for businesses in relation to the environment. However, another independent agency is NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and their job is not to regulate any industry per se, but their job is to create and explore space, or create crafts and explore space to bring back new information. So independent agencies covers a really wide group of different agencies in the federal government, but these are just two of those types. Now, the final type of federal protection agency that we're going to talk about is a regulatory agency. Now, regulatory agencies cover really all the agencies we've talked about so far, and but the specific thing about regulatory agencies is that they are outside of any other branch of government. So they are not beholden to the executive or the legislative branch. They are in place to improve and to regulate the economy. So recently, President Barack Obama created a new regulatory agency, and that is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, he created this agency because of the backlash from the credit and housing boom and bust. And so he felt that it was important for consumer financial protection to be a key element of his administration because a lot of people were taken advantage of during the housing bubble and bust. And so he felt that this was a good way to establish a federal agency that could do just that. And so this is basically where we're looking at as far as federal protection agencies. These, again, are agencies that may not necessarily come and arrest you if you break their rules, but as we discussed before, are groups that will fine you or shut you down possibly if you are not following the correct rules. Now, let's head back to law enforcement agencies. And typically this is what we think of when we think of enforcing law. And there are three different levels of law enforcement. There's the federal agency, and these are agencies that enforce federal laws, and they have the ultimate jurisdiction over all other agencies. So if a federal agency comes in to investigate a crime, they are the ones that are in charge, not the state or the local law enforcement agency. And there are two examples of federal agencies that enforce law. One is the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. No doubt you've heard of the FBI. And they have authority to investigate violations that are criminal in basis, and they provide other law enforcement agencies with fingerprinting, lab examinations, and other services to cooperate and to solve crimes at any level. And so the FBI is really sort of the umbrella enforcement agency that oversees and helps any law enforcement agency. Now, the other federal agency is what's called the U.S. Marshals, and they're essentially the enforcement arm of the executive branch. They assist in court security, prison transport, warrants for arrest for fugitives. You will see them in a lot of movies, you'll see U.S. Marshals. They are also on airplanes to make sure that terrorism is not an issue. So the U.S. Marshals are there as sort of the first line of defense in a lot of federal issues. Now, after we talk about federal, let's move on now to state agencies, state law enforcement agencies. The first one that we would talk about in North Carolina is the North Carolina SBI, not the FBI, but S, because they are the State Bureau of Investigation. And they are there, similarly to the FBI, but at a state level, to assist local law enforcement with investigations. And they have statewide jurisdiction, so they can patrol any place in the state and can make arrests and solve crimes throughout the state of North Carolina. Another group that has jurisdiction throughout the state of North Carolina is the North Carolina Highway Patrol. Now, their jurisdiction, even though it is all of North Carolina, is specific to the roads of North Carolina. So they're there to protect and promote safe travel on North Carolina roads. And you'll see them mostly on interstates. So that's really their main jurisdiction. And then we'll talk about local law enforcement agencies, and this is who we deal with most on a one-on-one basis when we're talking about law enforcement. And there's the Sheriff's Department. Now remember, the Sheriff's Department, they are the ones that have control over the jails, and they are bailiffs, and they are ones that deliver court subpoenas, things of that nature. That's what the Sheriff's Department is for. They're not necessarily going to arrest you or solve crimes. They are more sort of they're there as an agency to help enforce laws, but they're not solving crimes per se. They will arrest you if they see you commit a crime, but they will not necessarily be the first line in that defense. And then there's the police department, and really the police department is typically who most people have the most contact with, and they enforce the laws within a city, within a municipality, a town, a village, whatever the area of their jurisdiction is. That's where they enforce the law. And they're the ones that are going to give you citations for speeding on most roads. They're the ones that are going to come and investigate crimes. And so the police department, headed by the police chief, is really who does most of the law enforcement that we recognize as citizens. So I hope this has helped you to determine who enforces the laws, and we're going to talk more about law enforcement both at the federal protection agency level and at the state and local level as well. All right, enjoy. Have a great day. Bye.